Michael McQuade. Welcome to the show.
Hi, Sam. Thank you.
It's a pleasure to have you again. So we're on to episode 4 of your Michael McQuade Masterclass, and we're covering finding your ideal client. So let's go straight into question 1, a biggie. How do you define your ideal client?
Yeah, that is a big one. So I'm going to talk about this from the point of view of, I guess, just for the viewers or listeners. So I had a surveying practice that I built and sold. So I'm going to talk about it from that point of view because that's, I guess, most relevant to talking about this. So I guess you've got to go back to basics and think about first of all, be clear on what your offering is, what you're selling, and who you're, and map out who your ideal client is and who's going to buy this from you. So you've got to be clear on that sort of stuff. And some of this is workshopping that out. If you've got a team of people or you've got somebody you can do that with, is just figuring out what does that person look like. And it's simple things that you've got to do because a lot of people don't do this. And again, I do various, business mentoring with companies as well, small businesses, off the back of my experience of founding, growing and selling a professional services business. And a lot of the time people haven't really sat down and thought about who their client is. They think they know who their client is, but then they're selling the wrong thing to the wrong person. So for example, are you selling direct to consumer? Are you selling business to business? The language that you use and the things you talk about are very different when you're talking direct to a consumer in your marketing or your sales activity, or if you're talking to a business in your marketing or your sales activity. And then that's the first fundamental thing to understanding and get right. And then the next thing you've got to do then is when you're talking to each of those different, let's say, avatars or client profiles, is, I guess, what are they looking for then when they're looking for your service? So if you've identified that they do need your service, how do they look for your service? What kind of things are they coming up against? What kind of problems are they facing that means that they want to use your service and could use you? And it's identifying all of that. And sometimes if it's a consumer as well, it's going down. I mean, that's the stuff you need to do. You need to understand whether it's consumer or whether it's a business you're selling to. You would even go down as far as drilling into what type of person is this? What type of house do they live in? What type of car do they drive? All of that kind of stuff that builds up the sort of profile about maybe the affluence of the person as well. How much money they have to spend. And again, that would influence how you would talk to them or not talk to them in certain ways. I'm going to go on for another bit because this is a big question and there's various different parts to it. But I guess one of the other things then to think about is when you're thinking about your typical client and you've identified them. And the other thing to point out is that sometimes you just don't have one client, you have a number of clients that you're selling to. And that's why it's very important to identify and go through this exercise, because doing this might show you that you have a number of different types of client. Some of them could be direct to consumer, some of it could be business to business. So you'll have multiple client profiles that you're selling to. You identify them first of all, break them down into all of their profiles, and then you start to think about what are their pain points. So each of these individual client profiles, what are the pain points? How do they talk about what it is that their problems are, what it is that they're frustrated with? And again, that's a whole other kind of workshop and business exercise to get down to figuring out and understanding, because if you don't know how they talk about their problem, you can't effectively sell to them as well as you can do if you know how they talk about it, what their concerns are, because now you can focus on that when you start to talk about what you sell and when you start to build a relationship with them and start to get their trust in you and your product, because it seems like you're somebody that they need to come to because you understand their problems, you understand their frustrations, and here's how your solution fixes that.
Yeah, that's a really good point, actually. It's about trying to identify their problems and come up with a solution to help them ultimately reach their goal.
Exactly. Yeah. So a lot of the time, sometimes people make a mistake, and again, I see this a lot where people make a mistake of selling something in the way that they think it needs to be sold. Well, the bottom line is you're not buying your product. Your customer is buying your product. And unless you know how your customer thinks, then you're not going to sell any product, because it's as simple as that, because you won't appeal to the things. You have to identify what their buying signals are. You have to appeal to their emotions about what it is that they need and why they choose a particular product. And it's not necessarily choosing your product or your service. That's probably comes low down in the ranking of how they make a decision. They'll make their decision because of how you've presented your solution, how you've presented the way that you solve their problem. And that's what makes their buying decision come to you, because you've clearly showed them how you solve their problem. And so that's the key. But you've got to go through all that really hard work at the start, and it's really detailed, and it takes a lot of time and effort to go through that process. But it is a key exercise to do, because once you do that, then you understand now how to speak to them, and you understand how to get that sale over the line. Whereas a lot of the time, people are selling stuff, they're selling their services, selling their product, and using the language that they want to use, which is not how their customer speaks or how their customer thinks about their problem. And that's the big mistake that people make.
Yeah, that's a very good point. You've got to put yourself in the customer's shoes, I'd say. And you've mentioned the word mistake a couple of times. So what mistakes do people make when they're identifying their ideal client, and how can people overcome them?
Well, I guess one of the big ones would be that they haven't fully identified their audience, and they're talking to too broad of an audience. So the trouble is, if you haven't identified all, like we spoke about earlier, if you haven't identified all these individual client types that might fit within what it is that you're selling or that could buy your services, particularly if you are a business that offers different types of services, well, then there will be a different type of client that might buy each one of those. If you haven't identified those properly, a mistake is that your selling and your marketing and all your language that you're using is speaking to too broad of an audience. So you're trying to cover too many people with this single sales activity, and that doesn't work. That leads to nothing. So I think that's a big thing. Having things as well that people don't really want. So again, it might sound silly, but a lot of the time companies are offering products or services. They're offering them in a way that people don't want them necessarily. While they do buy them, they could sell far more if they tailored them to actually be a bit more centered around what the customer says that they want, or what the client says that they want, and the problems that they say they have. If it's tailored that way, then you get much more sales, because now you have people who are more quickly able to see what it is that you do and how your solution solves their problem. So again, it's not being clear on your offering and how that solves the client's problem. That's another thing. I think as well, making assumptions as well. A lot of people make assumptions about what their clients want, or what a particular customer will buy, or what their problem is, without necessarily doing a bit of research in that and finding out, and asking existing clients, asking existing customers, getting feedback, getting testimonials, not even just testimonials, but just getting feedback on how the service went, looking internally at how this service went, how it was delivered, to identify maybe things that aren't quite working so well for the client or the customer. And then I guess being inflexible to change as well. So not being ready to adapt whenever you get feedback, which again comes from somebody who has fixed their service, fixed their way of selling their service based on what they think is correct. And then they become inflexible to change that, because they aren't willing to take on feedback or from clients, or seeing what's happening in the market and adjusting their offering, because they have told themselves this is what the client wants, without actually understanding if that is what the client wants.
Yeah, and I suppose at the end of the day, you've got to do what the client wants, else you're not going to sell your product. So what research would you do to find out who your ideal client is? You touched on speaking to previous clients, customers, however you want to phrase it. If you delve into that a little bit deeper, but also give us some suggestions on other ways to research your ideal client.
Well, I guess, so first of all, if we assume you've identified them properly, you know who they are, then you can do market research, I guess, on the specific types of clients that you're targeting and the industries that they work in, understand things that are topical for them in their industry at the moment that then you can bring into use when you're talking about your product and your selling. Researching their company as well, just maybe researching their companies, understanding who do they buy from at the moment. Is there reasons why they might buy from those people? What sort of companies do they buy their services from? So if you're a really small business, for example, and you're looking at targeting a big company, but they only use big companies, big similar companies to them with 50 plus people in it, and you're a 10 person team, maybe they won't use your service because maybe they won't, they will have some criteria that says that the service provider that they use has to have a turnover of X. The service provider that they use will have to have a minimum level of PI cover, for example, or a minimum level of insurance cover. So there are things like that you can find out, and do a bit of research on to find out, to make sure that you're not trying to sell to the wrong people as well. And then just use social media online, particularly, I guess, because we're talking about business stuff here. LinkedIn for business. So looking at LinkedIn, seeing what people are saying on LinkedIn, researching the companies, I guess what their communication style is and what they're talking about online as well, which gives you some insight as well into helping you to maybe how you can use that as a hook then when it comes to trying to reach out to these people and target them to sell your services to. The other thing to say is that selling comes later. First of all is relationship building. So what you're doing first of all, and I guess that's another mistake that I didn't mention earlier that people make, is that they try and sell too soon. But so back to the research point, so social media, and just finding out and using those tools and using those platforms where people talk about trade magazines, that kind of thing, trade journals, online communities, to find out what is concerning people in certain industries and certain sectors, and then using that as a tool to help you then to form relationships with them, eventually to sell and offer your service.
Yeah. So where do you find your ideal client? You've mentioned LinkedIn. What else? Because social media is so big these days, but there's a lot of noise to cut through. So what other methods would you suggest?
Well, I guess attending industry events. So finding out where your ideal client hangs out. That could be various different things, because again, you might have various different client profiles. It's understanding where do they hang out? Where can you get in front of them? Is that going to conferences? Is that going to researching certain types of networking do's that happens? Because I guess across all industries, there'll be various different networking events that happen. Some of it will be closed to anybody who's not from the industry, but some of them will be open. So it's just getting yourself in rooms where those people are. Because I guess finding people is a mixture, and it's easier nowadays to find people, particularly with how easy it is to connect with people on social media. It's easier to find people quickly, but I still think that you've got to have like a multi-faceted approach. You've got to be meeting them in person, and you've got to be finding and having online conversations with them as well, because neither one of those things will be good enough on its own. You need a mix of the both. Some you will find work better with just connecting with people, for example, on LinkedIn or some other social media platform. Some people won't really engage on that, and you'll bump into them and you'll have far more success when you meet them at a conference or at a networking event. So it's really finding out and using online forums and using social media as well to find out what happens in your ideal client's industry, what events are they going to, and using that as a way to find out events then that you could possibly go along to as well, or sponsor, or write articles for magazines or trade journals that they read, so that again it's just about getting awareness out there to the right people of you and your company.
I think that's a great point, to offer your services to a magazine, to write an article or two, and it instantly puts you as an authority. And if it's in the right magazine, the odds are you're going to get somebody reach out via LinkedIn, I assume, and want to know more about you.
Exactly. I mean, it's a great tool to use, because I guess people who are reading that, they may not be online, they may not be very present. They might have a presence online, but they might not be active online. Some people, not everybody goes to conferences or networking events either. So yeah, that's just another way. And again, it's not that's, I guess all of these things are a combination of all the things you have to do, because you'll have a certain amount of success out of each one of them. But if you're able to do an article for a magazine or podcast or that kind of thing, it's a good way of getting in front of a lot of people who will be interested in your topic because they're only listening to it or reading it because they have a specific interest in that industry or that area. And if you can be seen to be somebody that has a deep understanding and has a certain level of expertise and skill in that area, it just means then that when they see you the next time, or if you approach them online or some other way, or you meet them at a networking event, they'll already have started to build some trust in your expertise, your depth of knowledge, and what it is that you can do to help them.
Yeah, that's absolutely spot on. It's taking that initial, how can I say it? They know you before you know them.
Yes.
That's key. And they feel familiar with you. And it's like they're going to be chatting with an old friend, although you've never met them. They know you.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, because the thing about selling, and this is again a mistake that a lot of people make, is that they sell too soon. And it's not about selling, actually, it's about relationship building, and the sale comes later. You've got to build a relationship first of all. You've got to, people have to hear you and see you for so many times, before they will become trusting enough to listen to you try to sell to them. If you try and sell to them straight off or too soon, then it just drives them the other way, and they just ignore you. And I think again, to go back to that is the biggest mistake that I see a lot of people making when it comes to selling, is trying to sell too soon. Actually, what you need to do is you need to build a relationship, show people why you are an expert in your field, show them what your solutions are and talk about that so that they become comfortable that you do know what you're talking about, that you are a safe pair of hands, you're knowledgeable, and that you have a solution for their problem. And then when the time is right, they will either reach out to you, or when you reach out to them, they will be now interested in having the phone call. Because the key to all of this stuff is to getting that interaction where you have a one-on-one call with somebody or a one-on-one meeting with somebody, because then that's when you can start to do your selling. And that's the key, because you won't do your selling by just sending somebody random emails or reaching out on LinkedIn and offering them your product. That won't work. You're building up the relationship to get that phone call, and then in that phone call, that's when you're truly building that relationship, and where you're truly able to come across as the person that can really help the other person. And that's when they're most likely then to start to think about making a buying decision from that call onwards. Again, it won't necessarily be in that call, but once you've cracked that point of getting to the first phone call, now we have now we're building a personal relationship together. We're building rapport, and now it's more likely now that I will be able to sell to you very soon.
Yeah, love that response. So what are some red flags that show that somebody is not your ideal client, even after they've expressed an interest in buying your product or service?
Oh, red flags. I guess if somebody is somebody's constantly talking to you, but they're never making any buying decisions. If somebody is asking you for price reductions, and I guess, price reductions, I would say, is a big one, where some people, now saying that, for some people, it's just a case of they have to ask this question because they just want some sort of a deal. And if you give them 50 quid off, then they're happy. It's not that they're looking for $2,000 off. It's just the fact that they want to be able to have said something. I think it's more the people who are trying to really reduce your price for something, without reducing the service. So what I used to do in our business, when I was leading that, was that if anybody asked for a price reduction that was significant, I would say, okay, that's fair enough. If that's your budget, here's the things we will have to cut out of our service in order to do it for you at that price, because we won't do that service at that price. So if you want that price, here's what we can do for you at that price. But it isn't the gold standard that you were getting when we gave you the price initially. And that quite quickly then turns the conversation around, and you find out then if the person is really interested in your service or not. And if they aren't interested in paying good money for a proper service, well, then they aren't the right type of client for us. So that's a thing I would say to people as well, is to be happy to turn clients away. As well, when they start to come across like that with you as a business, when they start to, because if they truly want the service that you're providing, you will already know that you're not being unreasonable in your price. So therefore, you want to remove those people that are just looking for the same service for a lot less, because they will drive you mad in the long run. And people as well, sometimes I guess you get people as well who are really ingrained with another service provider, but they keep coming back to you for a quote, for something or other. And you spot if you're always doing quotes for people, but you're never winning work, you want to question why that is. And you want to start raising, raising calls with those people and finding out to get proper feedback from them. Because another mistake that I see people making is that they continuously quote with companies or for other people, never winning any work, or they win a really small proportion. They convert a really small proportion of their quotes. So quite often they can just be being used as a stalking horse for somebody else. So, you're always giving a quote that somebody's then going back to somebody else with to get them to reduce their quote by. So you want to kind of avoid doing that as well, and sort of watch out for those type of clients, because what you want to really do is you want to be building, because this is all relationship led stuff. And if you like, price becomes secondary. Because again, although you're selling to somebody and somebody's buying a service from you, they're really buying the solution that you can give them, the solution to their problem, which is when you break it down to the very basics, they're buying a solution. And quite often, if everything is aligned, the cost, as long as everything is reasonable and reasonably priced, they're happy to pay whatever it takes for that solution, because that's what they're buying. They're buying that. And then price becomes secondary. It's actually about the service now, and it's about what you do for them. And those are the sort of people that you want to be surrounding yourself with as a business. When you're selling your services, you want to be surrounding yourself with people where, yes, price is a concern, because they're not going to pay over the odds. But they're happy to pay a good price because they're interested in your solution. They aren't penny pinching. And those are the sorts of people you want to have. And the minute you start to find out that new clients are becoming more about the money, and aren't so, they place more emphasis on the cost than the service, then those are the sort of clients that are probably not right for you in the long run, and you want to start weeding those out.
Brilliant. I think that's absolutely fantastic, Michael, and a very good point to end on. So if people want to reach out and know more about you and what you do, how can they do that?
Yeah, they can find me on LinkedIn. So Michael McQuade on LinkedIn. I'm the Michael McQuade, MRICS. Probably should spot me fairly easily from my profile image. And they can find me. I've got a website where I talk about, I do property mentoring, but I also do business mentoring as well with small businesses, and do some board advisory work as well with companies. So, but they can find out more about me on our website, which is michaelmcquade.co.uk. There's a lot of information on there about what I do, and also testimonials from companies large and small that I've helped with their business problems.
Brilliant. Thanks a lot, Michael. And I've really enjoyed today.
Lovely. Thank you, Sam.